necessarily things you're going to hear other places. And that does happen in the prologue. So, okay, now, today, I don't even know what I'm going to title this, but this is kind of in keeping with our theme of why you really can't trust scientists to be the modern day priest class, or the modern day, not, we shouldn't have a priest class is what I'm saying. I'm saying that you cannot trust science to deliver to you anything that is fundamental truth. As I've said before, science is a very good methodology for mathematically organizing, conceptually organizing in mathematical terms, how we observe our environment, be it our bodies. And when I say our, I'm implying the I of each one of us. Each one of us has a singular self. That's our existential frame of reference. That's our metaphysical root, the self, which makes it possible for you to speak the pronoun I and have it actually be meaningful to you, because your body is a function of an infinite number of parts. So where, if we're just our body, where would the pronoun I have any relevance? The very idea that a multi-component brain would come up with the concept of I to describe itself wouldn't make any sense unless there was an actual metaphysical singularity there. I mean, you said consciousness is an epiphenomenon produced by chemical processes in the brain, and this a function of biological evolution, and this a function of the laws of physics and particle physics and quantum mechanics and all this kind of stuff. These things all deal in parts, and yet how would it be rational that this vast mechanism of almost an infinite number of parts, or an infinite number of parts, would generate a concept of I that would be actually meaningful to the brain which creates it? And the answer is it wouldn't. Now, I understand the scientists are going to tell you at the quantum level, we're dealing in properties, and it's kind of like, it's an infinity of parts is essentially a single part, right? And so they're going to try to square a circle with their sort of scientific metaphysics, this sort of scientific approach to metaphysics, which is always completely contradictory and full of cognitive dissonance, which is why scientists can't be trusted with metaphysics. They should just stick with the physical part of it. And the mathematics of conceptually organizing our environment, that would be fine if they did that. But the point being is that, no, the single self is you. That's the self. So when I say that science is a great way for us, for us to conceptually organize our environment, meaning in this case mathematically, in our environment can be our body, it can be our world, it can be our universe. When I say I'm referring to this singular self, the metaphysical root of your existence, the existential frame of reference of you qua you. Okay? Once we start getting into fundamental truths, the fundamental truth, what is man? What is real? What exists? What is God? What is anything? We are dealing with the metaphysical, where science has no business being. Science does not inform the philosophical informs science. The better the philosophy, the better the science. So, as we are in the postmodern West, chock full up to our necks in postmodern Gnostic mystic philosophy, which is all nonsense, you will notice, mark my words, you will notice the science will become less science and more propaganda. The science will not be done as effectively or efficiently. It will not prove to be as efficacious, and you will be told, well, the problem is you're just not in a position to understand because you're not enlightened like your scientific priest class, and just trust the science, even though it makes no sense to you. Don't believe your lying eyes. The science is perfect, we're perfect, and we're telling you, you need to trust this. My point being is that because the philosophy is so bad, in philosophy, or the assumptions man makes about himself, the nature of himself, and his environment, and where it came from, meaning God, however you define him, the metaphysical primary, the root of reality, and that which binds all of reality in this plurality. Once that philosophy becomes chaotic, nonsensical, self-nullifying, contradictory, like postmodern scientific determinism, which is just modern day version of Gnostic mysticism, you're going to get, because that philosophy informs science, not the other way around, bad philosophy, you're going to get bad science. And they will try to excuse it by saying, you just don't understand. Just trust us, bro. Trust the science. Don't believe your lying eyes. And so the point of this upload is just to say, yeah, this is going to be another reason why scientists should do their thing, and they should leave thinking about what constitutes fundamental truth, what's real, what exists, where does it come from, what is man, what is consciousness, these metaphysical propositions, what is God. A scientific determinist atheist has no business talking about God because God is a metaphysical proposition, and atheism is either a null hypothesis, which means it has no epistemological or ethical foundation, no metaphysical foundation, which means it's an intellectual void, which means it can't make any claims about the existence of anything, including God, or atheism is scientific determinism, which calls itself atheism, in which case has no business because scientific determinism is nominally rooted entirely in the physical universe and appeals to physics, not metaphysics, has no business talking about God because God's a metaphysical proposition. So anytime an atheist tries to talk to me about whether God exists, anytime an atheist tries to tell you whether God exists or doesn't, just there's no point. That's a debate that might make for great YouTube views. You know, Jordan Peterson debates 25 atheists. I mean, that's interesting. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere. Because an atheist can't hear any truths about God. They can't hear it because they are proceeding from fundamental assumptions that completely reject God as non-existent a priori. So they can't tell you whether God exists or doesn't exist because from their point of view, God is not a concept they even recognize because God is metaphysical. So an atheist has no business talking about God, and it's pointless to talk to an atheist about God. It's a waste of time. The only real relevant discussions about God is, first, you understand what are we talking about when we're talking about God. We're talking about metaphysical primary, the roots of reality. Where does all of this come from? What is the singular source that binds the plurality of existence together? What is the cause, the creator, and how do we define that creation and cause? So that's the argument. And so the only real debate is who has the more rational definition of God, of the metaphysical primary. You can't have a debate about God, therefore, with an atheist because an atheist doesn't have a metaphysical primary. I mean, scientific determinism does have metaphysical primaries, but they're rationally indefensible. They don't like to talk metaphysics. They don't like to talk about God because their metaphysics are a rational disaster. And so they have to stay in the realm of the physical, right? So atheists aren't going to be talking about the metaphysical in any sense. And therefore there's no point having a discussion about God with them. They don't know from God. So the only real debate is who has the better metaphysical primary. If you reject metaphysics and a metaphysical primary out of hand, how can you have a debate about them? You can't have a debate about a metaphysical primary with someone who doesn't recognize a metaphysical primary as anything. And that's what atheism is. So the whole idea that atheists have anything to say about God is silly. It's nonsense. You have guys that have built their whole careers on being world famous atheists who, by their very own implicit admission, don't have anything to say about God, whether you should believe in or not believe in. So anyway, the point being is that most atheists, when they are arguing with Christians, are really just trying to peddle their own scientific determinist mysticism, and it's metaphysically impossible at its root. So they have to approach the debate. They're trying to peddle scientific determinism without actually having to defend it, because if they have to defend it, they have to defend the implied metaphysics of scientific determinism. They will come out looking like buffoons, because it's not scientific determinism as a philosophical substrate for reality is nonsense. So they do the sleight of hand. They make the truth the science so that they can peddle the implicit non-science of scientific determinism, mysticism, which will end up being chaotic. and totalitarian and disastrous and tyrannical, because that's what Gnostic mysticism always ends up being. That's what the government is. The existence of government is rooted in metaphysics, which are entirely Gnostic mysticism. There's a divinely enlightened priest class that somehow has some absolution from their own original sin of an insufficient consciousness, who has now been divinely enlightened and therefore appointed to coerce the rest of the unwashed and blind masses into obedience. That's what government is. So, at any rate, okay, so we are going to talk about something I heard Sean Carroll say. Now, I never heard of Sean Carroll before. Sorry, I got to take another supplement because I'm old. Okay. I'll try to get less spurgy here so I can maintain my energy. And there may be a part 2 to this. I don't have much of an audience to disappoint, but for any of you who came, there were like 15 views, and of those, probably like 20% last past the first 20 seconds. I don't even, not that I look at the specs or look at the analytics, because it's too depressing. But I get it. I mean, I understand. Look, these ideas are just not going to be accessible to most people because they're just too foreign, you know. It's why certain music never gets a really, there's certain musical styles that never really develop any following, because it's just too different. It's not what the masses are used to hearing, and so it's almost like the masses can't hear it. It's not that there's anything inherently wrong with it or that it's bad. It's just most people grow up in a certain sort of aesthetic and how would I say this? Most people grow up in this sort of cultural zeitgeist that, you know, that has certain fundamental assumptions about it that sort of drive how people subconsciously interpret their reality. And anything contrary to that, whether it's aesthetic or epistemological or metaphysical, if it's too different, they can't see it. They can't hear it. And this is why I have probably maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 people that'll listen to the whole video. And I do appreciate you very much. But yeah, it's, you know, and you tell me how I'm going to make this information accessible to the masses. Number one, I don't want to, because the masses aren't a thing with me. I mean, the masses don't have any fundamental metaphysical value or root value, and therefore, because I deal in metaphysics, mostly in fundamentals, appealing to the masses is not something that really comes up as having any sort of primary value to me. The primary point of appealing to the masses is to acquire resources, right? The more people you can bring to your business, such as it is, the more money you make. But that is not a fundamental value to me and what I do. And so you see, it's kind of a catch-22. The better I am at this, the less likely I'm gonna, you know, make any money off of it or get a following for it. Which I guess that's just the deal you make when you decide that the only truth you're going to accept is completely, utterly, fundamentally, rationally consistent truth, and 99.9% of the people you grew up with and your greater society do not function like that. Yeah, you're not going to have much of a following. And of course, there's also my delivery. But who cares? You know, again, who cares? Maybe maybe these thoughts will be appealing to somebody. And you always have the fast forward button. You can always just fast forward to the point of, you can always fast forward to the meat of the video, so to speak, at your leisure. So I don't want to delete it, and I don't want to edit it anymore because it's exhausting. Just doing this psychologically it's exhausting. But also, I don't know. If there's even one person that gleans something that's helpful out of my ramblings here, I don't want to delete it, because I want them to be able to go back and listen to it, even if it's just one person. And like I said, if I was doing this for money, I would be talking about the top 10 greatest guitar players, or why Eric Clapton really sucks. You know, if I wanted views, I would do videos like that. Okay, so there's a scientist called Sean Carroll, physicist. I think he works at Johns Hopkins. Had never heard of him until I heard this sort of debate between him and Bret Weinstein about Bret's, I guess, explication or attempt to create a unified theory of the universe. And Sean Carroll represented the sort of status quo, and he was explaining to Bret Weinstein why his theory was nonsense and wouldn't work. And Bret Weinstein was rambling on about gatekeeping and all this kind of stuff within the physics community, and how he is being irrationally shut out because he's not playing by the same rules. I don't know, it's that kind of thing. But my point is that's where I first heard of Sean Carroll, and I was just watching a short with him in it, because of course as soon as you click on any video in YouTube, the next time you go to YouTube, that's all you get are recommended videos, full of this subject. So heaven forbid, if you just want to look up one thing just once, you're going to get tons of videos about that one thing for like the next 2 days. But anyway, so Sean Carroll was trying to explain in this short, and again, I'm not going to explain the sum and substance of what he said, because it's really just this phrase that caught my ear, because that's who I am. But he was saying, I think he was saying something like, we think of the Big Bang as like there was nothing and then there was something. And he's like, well, it's not really like that. It's not like there was before nothing. You had nothing and then all of a sudden everything just popped into existence. It's not really like that. And he goes, you see, at the beginning there was this first moment of time. And that's all I heard, because after that, I was just like, that's how my brain works. Because as soon as I hear a contradiction, that's all I can hear. Everything else you say after that precedes from that, means nothing to me, because it's rooted in this contradiction. And so as soon as he goes, there's a first moment of time, and this is how scientists explain the beginning of the universe. This is how they explain where everything comes from. This is the problem. They explain the origins of their metaphysics starts with bullshit like this. The first moment of time, the beginning of time, a brief history of time. It's always rooted in these contradictions that just don't make any sense. There is no such thing as the beginning of time, because time is the beginning by definition. Meaning, you don't have a beginning of time unless you already have time by which you can value the beginning. Beginning has no meaning, has no frame of reference, nor any relevancy, nor any existence, therefore, unless time already exists. So you can't have the beginning of time without time already being there to give meaning and relevance and efficacy to the beginning, right? Time is an abstraction, people. It doesn't exist. It's like space. In and of itself, it is an infinite continuum. I'm not saying it's a line. I'm not saying it's a ray. It is simply infinity qua infinity, just like space. Space qua space is infinite space. Time qua time is infinite time. It's just infinity qua infinity. It has no value in and of itself. But instead of admitting this, the scientific community has to be the smartest people in the world, which means they have to be able to give you the big answers. So they play these conceptual games, and they say things like this. There was a first moment of time. This is a problem. Time, by definition, is the moment. You can't have a moment before you have the moment. You see what I mean? You can't have time before you have time. It's like Hawkins's book, A Brief History of Time. I used to think he was being ironic, and then I realized he's not being ironic, because you still hear scientists and physicists talk about stuff like this. First moment of time, the beginning of space and time. You hear them use phrases like this. And I'm like, I don't think Hawkins was being ironic at all. I think he meant that. He's going to give you a history of time. Time is the history, though. The very title is a contradiction. Time is the history. There's no history of history. Tell me about the time. What time did time start? At what time on the timeline did time do a thing? I mean, what time will time end? Time can't have a beginning or end. Time doesn't have a beginning. Time is the beginning. Time doesn't have an end because time is the end. What time will time end? And if you have a beginning or end of time, then you have therefore implied a before time or an after time. But before and after are temporal terms when we're speaking temporally. I know before and after are different terms when we're talking about an object, the beginning of the car versus the back of the car, the front of the car and the back of the car, the beginning of the car and the end of the car, I understand this, but we're speaking specifically temporally. So if we say there's before time and after time, that's a contradiction. What was before time? Before is a temporal concept. It doesn't have any relevance without time. So there's no such thing as before time. That's a contradiction. There's no such thing as after time. Time can't end at itself. What time does time end? Time will end at 8:30 on Monday, January, blah, 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 2036. You've just used time as the frame of reference for its own ending. No, Sean Carroll, you can't have a first moment of time. That doesn't make any sense. You don't have a conceptual frame of reference for that. Therefore, you cannot interpret the beginning of the universe like that. That's a contradiction. A contradiction is an epistemological and ethical black hole. It's a void. It's devoid of meaning and devoid, therefore, of any applicable value. Okay? So time is the moment. This is the contradiction. Time by its very nature is infinite. It's a continuum. And I'm not trying to sound like a pretentious jerk here, but that's how they treat people like me. That's how they treat millions of my fellow Christians. Now, again, I do look with some affection on my Christian brothers and sisters because oftentimes they act in spite of their metaphysics. The rational atrocity that is their doctrine, in my experience, much of the time doesn't actually inform how they treat people. Thankfully, they act usually in spite of it. But these scientific atheists who spout this kind of nonsense about trying to square the circle of this rational abomination called the Big Bang or whatever, or trying to square the circle of how you can have a scientific explication for the beginning of everything, which you can't because it's a philosophical question, it's a metaphysical question, not a physical one. They treat us with the same kind of contempt. I mean, how many atheists have you ever, I have not gotten a single compassionate, understanding atheist in the comments section. And again, I don't get that many comments. I get it. The point being is that usually atheist videos, these scientific determinists, they talk to people who don't agree with them like they're idiotic buffoons. And they wear their stupid t-shirts. Science doesn't care about your feeling. Facts don't care about your feeling. The science doesn't care. The science doesn't believe in God. They're dumb, pointless. The t-shirts that make them look dumb, that they think make them look really smart. They treat us with contempt. They look at us as our position is risible. And it's not. God will not be made a fool of. I'm sorry. If you understand what God is and you understand what his proper nature is, he simply is. The metaphysical primary can be rationally defended. The metaphysical primary called God can be rationally defended. That's a fact. And so because I know this, I don't like it when I see atheists and scientific determinists, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens speak to believers like we're buffoons, like there's some kind of enlightened, there's some kind of intellectual, they represent some kind of intellectual evolution of a greater species. They've got this enlightenment. Oh my gosh, God is nonsense. It's just all tribal fairy tales. When there are Christians out there that are as smart as they are, if not smarter, and they talk to us like we're buffoons, when their actual position is the one that's rationally indefensible. That's why they have to hide it. That's why they like to argue from atheism, because when you're arguing from an intellectual vacuum, from epistemological and ethical void, then yes, you have nothing to defend, ergo, you can't ever be wrong, quote unquote. This is why they love to argue from atheism, because they don't have to prove anything to you. They're the passive observer, and you have to prove to them something which you can never do because they're the passive observer, which means they don't have a frame of reference for anything. Therefore, you always lose the debate. They win before it starts. And we continue to fall for this nonsense. Stop talking to atheists about your faith. It's a waste of time. Because for all the reasons I said before, I won't go over again, it's a waste of time. If somebody says they're an atheist, just leave them alone. Don't entertain any conversations. Don't listen to their nonsense about God doesn't exist. Don't listen to their scientific determinist bullshit. Just move on. If they're a waste of, you shouldn't have any conversation with an atheist about God. I know that Christians, we want to evangelize and we want to proselytize. We want to tell people about Jesus. There is a point in time where it does become irresponsible to do that. When somebody has told you, I'm an atheist, there's no God, you are better off saving your energy and breath by carrying your message to someone, anyone else, or at least, anywhere else. Atheists are not somebody, they can't hear your message about God. Now, to the atheist's credit, the problem with Christianity, as I've said before, is the doctrine that informs certainly Protestantism and the metaphysics of Catholicism are rational abominations. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to be a Catholic or Protestant or whatever. I'm not saying that the belief in Jesus is bad or wrong. It's not. I think it's fully rationally defensible, but not according to the doctrine and the metaphysics of the church, so to speak, capital C, church. So in the defense of the atheists, the reason why a lot of them do reject Christianity and the concept of God is because it's not presented to them in a way that makes any sense. So credit where credit is due. But the point being is that they can't hear you. Even if you were to bring a rational message to them, they can't hear it. You could, as Jesus said, wow, his disciples said, wow, if we could show the doubters this person you raised from the dead, how could they'd have to believe in you. And you hear atheists will say, well, if you can show God to me, if you could do some crazy miracle right here in front of me, I would believe. No, they wouldn't. Jesus has said this long before I did. Jesus responded when the disciples said that to him. He said, they have Moses and the prophets. They wouldn't believe even if they saw someone rise from the dead, meaning that if they have rejected the rational argument for God and all of the other evidence, they're not going to believe even if you were to do a miracle in front of them. You see, the atheist already has his presuppositions about how reality works, and it's almost always rooted in scientific determinism. The laws of physics, the quantum universe, which is all mathematical, which is fine. I got no problem with that. I recognize the existence of the quantum universe. I said years ago, before I even knew what quantum physics was, I said, what is the difference between an object and its properties? Meaning, if you divorce an object from all of its properties, what do you have? There's no object. You don't have anything. So every object that we observe as material can be reduced down to its properties, because there is no distinction between an object and its properties. Every object removed from its properties doesn't exist. Everything that you observe and everything you interact with is a property. And it's a property that moves in a specific way to give you the perception and interaction of you dealing with a specific object. But that object can be reduced to a set of properties by which it has its being. And so I fully recognize that you do, at some sense, have to deal, as a scientist even, at the level of properties. And I think science has come up with, again, I wouldn't know, but I'm assuming they've come up with a mathematically brilliant way of dealing with reality, physical reality, at a level so small that it's reduced to just properties. I don't have any problem with science. I think science is awesome for what it is, and I think what it does is beautiful. I fully believe in the power of quantum mechanics and quantum physics to revolutionize technology. I completely believe that faster than light speed is possible. I believe that teleportation is probably possible. This is not a problem for me. None of this is a problem for me. I don't even have a problem with evolution, because evolution doesn't directly affect the nature of consciousness. So, but the point being is that, what was my point? I always stray, and sometimes I forget where I was going with that. But the point being is that Okay, I kind of lost track of thought there. But at any rate, I was talking about evangelizing. Anyway, okay, I'm just going to go back to what I said before, hopefully glean something from that. But yeah, don't bother evangelizing an atheist because they can't hear you. They can't, this is what I was saying. They already have their metaphysics. So they already have they already are functioning from their own presuppositions. They have their own presuppositions about the nature of reality and themselves and where it all comes from, and it's called scientific determinism. And so because everything they know is informed by those assumptions, those presuppositions, I was talking about the rising from the dead thing. Yeah. So if you raise someone from the dead before their eyes, you did a miracle because they interpret reality from their own preconceived, implicit, metaphysical, scientific determinist assumptions or presuppositions. They will interpret that not as a miracle as you would see it, but as a function of their preconceived metaphysical assumptions, meaning the reason why that happened isn't because God did it. There had to be a scientific explanation, and they might not know it yet, but they can be assured that there's a scientific explanation, and it's not God. So it doesn't matter how many miracles you do. They won't believe anyway, because what they believe is a function of what they assume about the nature of themselves in reality, which has nothing to do with God, which is why evangelizing, doing miracles, praying, it's a waste of time. They've already, before meeting you, rejected the efficacy of all that out of hand. Now, I hesitate because I don't want people to stop talking to atheists if they feel called to do that. I can understand how God might call you to, reach out to atheists. And the reason for this is because no matter how hardcore someone accepts an idea, you never know what's going on inside their spirit. There could be some doubt going on. So sometimes talking can help them feel more confident or more comfortable in nurturing a doubt about their own position. So I want to retract something I said. I don't want to say never, ever talk to atheists. I'm saying usually it's a waste of time. And if you're talking with a really recalcitrant atheist it's becoming stressful for you to deal with, you probably should walk away. But let's just say that if you're going to talk to atheists about God, you need to understand this information. They proceed from a completely different premise. Most likely, this will be a complete waste of time, and the only reason to do it is because there might be a seed of doubt in there that you're not seeing that you might actually begin to encourage. But understand that it's probably going to be tedious, it's going to be stressful, it's going to be most likely a waste of time, it's going to be emotionally draining, they're not going to hear you, and you need to make sure you have your own metaphysics and your own message rationally consistent, because they have a right to ask you questions. The atheist should be able to ask you questions about what you believe, and if you can't give them a rationally consistent answer, then they are not obligated to believe it. You can't go, I just believe because I do. That's bullshit. Everybody has a reason for every assumption they hold, okay? People if you don't have a reason for believing what you believe, then you don't really believe it. So you have to do your homework. If you're going to talk to an atheist about God, you have to be able to defend God rationally, and that can be hard. But anyway, enter into these kinds of discussions with atheists at your own risk, and assess the risk. And if you feel like it's not a thing that's going to be healthy for you or be too stressful for you, then like it is with me pretty much all the time, I don't really engage atheists at all anymore because it's just too tedious and exhausting. I've decided I've got other people I can talk to, but maybe that's not your spirit. Okay. So I'm going to continue this here. So time by its very nature is infinite. It is a continuum. It has no direction and thus no past, no present, no future. Time qua time is tautological. Defined as time is time. Like I said before, it's infinite. In and of itself, just like space, space is space. Time is time. Gravity is gravity, meaning that once you remove the objects which exist in these things, or as an expression of these things, or that express these things, once you remove those objects, those material objects, they have no intrinsic efficacy or definition. So time, outside of the objects which exist in it, has no meaning. That's why you can't have a first moment. Because he's just trying to tell you that time is time. You had the first moment. So you had a moment of a moment. That's what Sean Carroll's trying to say. There was a moment that there was a moment. So when they say there's a first moment of time or there's a beginning of time, what they're really saying is there was a time where there was time. There was a moment where there was a moment. Now, if they put it in those terms, you would go, well, that doesn't make any sense. That sounds like what you wouldn't hear anything after they said that because you'd be like, wait, that statement, that phrase you just used that's a contradiction. It makes no sense to me. You see, we can explain the beginning of everything. We can explain how the universe came to be. You see, there was a moment that there was a moment. There was a time that there was a time. And after that, you'd be like, whoa. Everything you say after that's bullshit because the very premise you began with is nonsense. So they say beginning of time. They say first moment of time. They just rephrase it, but the meaning's still there. So Sean Carroll's explanation of how the Big Bang came about, how the universe began, was there was a moment of a moment. Don't trust scientists to explain to you the how, why, and nature of reality. They don't know. They know how to mathematically organize it, and that takes a lot of IQ. I get it. They're smart, but they don't have any answers to the fundamental questions. So, don't look for them. Unfortunately, there's not many places you can look. You might have to just find them for yourself, like I did, because it doesn't seem like anybody had any real answers. That's why I had to start doing this, because no one had any answers that didn't generally rest upon some kind of cognitive dissonance, some intrinsic fundamental contradiction, some unresolvable paradox. In other words, everything that everybody believes usually is from what I could see when I first started asking questions, everything that everybody believes, from the scientist, from the politician, from the priest or pastor to your neighbor, everything everybody believes usually is rooted in some kind of contradiction that they just punt into the abyss of mystery when you press them on it. So unfortunately, if you want to find actual capital T truth, it's pretty difficult. So that is the niche I was hoping to fill with my channel, and because I don't do it right, I don't follow a script. You can't even see me. And because it's so different, and because I'm not the best speaker, and I'm a little spurgy, it's just not going anywhere, and it's basically too foreign. I'm not even saying it's a conspiracy or anything like that. I do understand that people who are actually demanding real answers are people that the vast majority of humanity just can't see, they can't hear, and they can't recognize. Again, it's like a music genre that's so weird that no one can really get behind it, except I think exponentially worse. So, at any rate, okay, so I'm going to finish this up because it's getting long and I have stuff to do. So, time qua time is tautological, defined as time is time. Okay, absent those things, okay, blah, blah, blah. I already said all this. Okay, think of it this way then. Without time already existing, there's no beginning to anything, including time. There can be no first moment of anything, including time, without time already existing. Space is the same thing. It shares the same tautological fallacy, where when we try to consider it on its own, removed from the objects which are said to exist in it. It has no meaning. Space is space. Outside of objects which exist in space, it's just space. It isn't a thing. It's a mathematical coordinate system, but mathematics are rooted in numbers which are rooted in one, which is infinity. So space is an infinite continuum that can be mathematically defined from a relative position, I suppose. You can have a mathematical constant like the speed of light, but that doesn't give any efficacy or fundamental substance or relevancy to space qua space. It's just tautological. It sums to zero. Space is space is basically one is one, which is the same thing as saying zero is zero. Infinity qua infinity is the same as nothing qua nothing. It doesn't have any meaning or relevancy. So space is infinite. Space is infinite, has no dimension. So space doesn't have any space. Space doesn't occupy space. The location doesn't have a location. So the point in space, the coordinate point in space, is an abstraction. It's a conceptual placeholder. The location in space doesn't have its own spatial location. It's a contradiction. So space is infinite in dimension qua space, and time is temporally infinite qua time. A moment of time is a unit of the infinity of time, which means any unit of infinity is itself infinite, right? So space is infinite with no dimensions of its own, and time is infinite, with no temporal value of its own. So without space already existing, there is nowhere for anything to be. Exactly. So there's nothing for anywhere. There is no place for anything to be without space, including space. So the idea that space wasn't, and then there was somehow space landed in a certain location when it came into being is nonsense. There's no space for space to exist until it already exists. There's no time for time to exist unless time already exists, you see? So without space already existing, there's nowhere for anything to be, including space. And without time, without a temporal place for something to exist, meaning, how did I say this? Okay, without space already existing, there's nowhere for anything to be. And without time already existing, there is no when for anything to be. So if time, this is what I used to say, if time and space were invented at the Big Bang, then the Big Bang never happened anywhere at any time because time and space weren't around. So you can't look at the Big Bang as having a beginning at any place. You have to look at the Big Bang as not occurring at all, because from your frame of reference, it would have never happened anywhere at any time, because time and space are a function of the Big Bang. Anyway. So I'm sure that they could basically equivocate on that by saying, well, if you really understood the Big Bang, as what, Sean? Well, if you really understood the Big Bang as not like being a thing, it didn't pop out of nothing. It was, there was something, and then the Big Bang happened. We just don't know what that something is. You see, so the better way to look at it is there was this first moment of time. There was this moment of a moment. Oh, thanks, Sean. Thank you. That's helpful. That really helps me. That helps me really figure out how everything got here. Stop looking to physicists and scientists as your philosophers. They can't tell you anything about anything. They can't. They're not in a position to talk about truth, value, nature, how anything got here, where anything is going to go. That's not what they do. And it's a shame that that's where we are, that we think that these are the people who are going to dictate the truth to us, and they're going to explicate to us the value of our own existence, and they're going to tell us what our consciousness is. I mean, and by extension, implicitly, what our values should be, what our ethics should be. It's just an abomination. It really is. I mean, atheists hate the church. That you'd be better off with the church. The medieval church, you'd be better off than what you have now. If you think the medieval church was bad, you just wait till the atheist philosopher kings get in charge. You've not seen anything yet. You want to see chaos and abomination and moral atrocity like you've never seen? Yeah, put the scientists in charge. Put the scientist in charge of truth, and you'll see what happens. I mean, it'll make the medieval church look like a lemonade stand. So, okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I think I said everything I needed to say. I didn't really need my notes. All right, I've talked for a whole hour, which is a really long time, but that's okay. That's how passionate I am about this. But anyway, thank you to anybody who's listened. I appreciate anybody who's listening. Hopefully you gleaned something from this. I apologize for how spurgy it is and how wordy, but this is what it is, and I hope it helped. If you find any of this interesting, if you've hung on this long, thank you. God bless you. You're wonderful. I appreciate the valuable time you've given me. I really hope and pray that you got something out of this, anything, even a little thing that helped you feel better. If you're in a place where you're not feeling good, you're stressed, you're anxious, you're uncertain, I hope there was something in here that just gave you a little bit of either pleasure or interest or entertained you or helped you, even if it's just a trifle. I hope you gleaned something, and I hope that this made somebody I hope this made anybody listening feel better somehow. So, having said that, I will get out of here and go on with my day. You go on with your day and have a great one, and we'll talk to you later. Okay, take care. Bye.